Now, usually when you think about Beretta as a company, you don't really think about micro compact 9mm handguns. What you usually think about is big monstrous things like the 92FS or the M9 and things of that sort, or the PX4 Storm. As far as micro compacts are concerned, you really don't think about Beretta being in that league. Usually you think about Ruger and their LC9 or Carr and their PM9 and things of that sort. Well, Beretta decided that they wanted to jump into the pool of micro compacts and come out with the Beretta Nano. So with that being said, let's jump into it and see if this gun is any good. As far as how the Beretta Nano looks, I have to be quite honest with you, it doesn't move me. You know, you have your basic serrations on the slide, and then you have your little grip textures and things like that. I can't really say that from a look standpoint that this gun really kind of does anything for me. It just doesn't do anything really. It's a little bit weird looking. It seems like it's kind of, there might be an excess of material on the actual firearm, like in this area here, and it looks a little fatter than what it really is because it's a rather slim gun. It's just not very pretty. So from an aesthetic standpoint, I don't really have a real take on the Beretta Nano. But the funny thing is, the name fits. As far as the way it looks, the name fits, Nano. When I look at this and I think Nano, this is kind of what I think about. But then even the name Nano doesn't really incite any real deep emotional feeling with respect to the name of the gun, or just in the word itself. So I guess the name is fitting. I just think that typically, considering how flashy most Beretta firearms are, I think this was, I won't want to say a step back, but a little bit more toned down for Beretta hand. It's a small gun and it's a micro compact. So yeah, I don't typically expect the gun to feel outstanding and just be very ergonomical, but there's something about the way they designed this grip that kind of gives it a really weird feeling. What they have is it doesn't look like it because you can't really see it, but this back hump here is very exaggerated. There's an exaggerated hump back here and a very sharp curve right here also. Now, typically you would think that's great for getting up under the bore and getting up under the slide to control recoil. The problem with this is that because the grip frame is so short, it feels odd. It feels awkward in your hand. It doesn't feel like it feels like this back part is kind of jabbing up inside your hand here. And with the type of checkering that they utilized on the Beretta Nano, it doesn't make for a very comfortable feel. And because it's a micro compact, of course, I'm only able to get 2 fingers on this actual grip. And you couple this exaggerated back hump along with the short grip and a very aggressive texturing here, it makes for a weird feel. And then on top of that, you have this trigger guard here that has no give. There's no indentation. There's nothing here that contours enough so that your finger isn't jamming up against the trigger guard, but it is in this particular case. And I have to say that I'm not really a big fan of the ergonomic system on this particular firearm, simply because this is just too exaggerated. If they had contoured this a bit so that it would basically facilitate your finger, if they would have contoured this so that your finger wasn't just jamming up against the trigger guard and gave some leeway for your finger to just kind of slide up inside the notch or the groove there, this gun would feel a lot better. But because they didn't, your middle finger just kind of fights against the trigger guard, your palm kind of fights against the palm swell here, and it gives you a false feeling of getting right up under the bore. Because if you look here, this is a very, very low bore axis. With guns like the Glock or the M&P, you are able to get really right up under the slide, but you don't really get that here in this particular. So it almost feels like the Nano is sitting on top of your hand instead of being in your hand in that particular sense. Now, what I will say from an ergonomic standpoint that I do like is the little indentation here at the front of the trigger guard, because what that does is that for those of us who like to practice good trigger finger discipline, it gives you a nice little shelf here to rest your trigger finger on when you're not shooting. Cognitively, you automatically want to place your finger here. Where unlike some other guns like the M&P series, there's really no place designated for you to kind of index your finger on the side of the firearm, so you naturally have a tendency to come to the trigger guard, which we all know is a big no-no when you're not ready to shoot. So I will give that to the Nano as far as ergonomics is concerned. Now, there is nothing on this gun whatsoever. It's completely flat. It's completely dehorned. Now, typically you would think, well, that's great. And what it allows for is a comfortable carry when you're carrying it. The only problem with that is when you take away the slide stop, something that everybody is really accustomed to, especially when you talk about polymer handguns, it makes the operation of this gun really weird. So you can't, if you look at it, if I drop the slide back and I lock it back, there's no way for me to drop this slide down, as you can see, unless I release the magazine. Once I release the magazine, then I can release the slide. And it's not very intuitive. And of course, that's kind of a training thing. And if you were to carry this gun, you would know that. Now, if the gun was loaded and you're ready to go, I don't see that being an issue. And something that you would have to train around. But it's just far as just manipulating it on a leisure, from a leisure standpoint, in terms of just manipulating it on a day-to-day basis, when you're at leisure, it can get a bit annoying because it's ingrained in our psyche to either utilize the slide stop or to be able to just kind of rack the gun back. But in this particular sense, once the gun is locked back with an empty magazine, you cannot drop that slide until you drop the magazine. I don't really know how I feel about that. It's kind of weird, it's kind of odd, it takes some getting used to. I don't really see the point in it, but they decided that they wanted to do it that way. Now, I'm assuming it has a lot to do with the fact that they wanted this gun to be completely formless and not have anything that could snag on your clothes or anything like that, which is good in theory, but in practice, the drawbacks of that, I think the drawbacks far outweigh the benefits of completely dehorning the gun. So in that regard, I have to say from an ergonomic standpoint, I'm not the biggest fan of the Nano, to be honest with you. As you can see here, that they run the same type of safe action trigger that they have on a Glock. So you got this little blade here that's supposed to prevent it from being fired if it's not completely depressed. As we all know, that's completely idiotic. It makes no sense whatsoever, but hey, they wanted to do it. Now, when you pull the trigger on the Nano, one thing you're going to notice is it's long. The trigger pull on this thing is long. It's long and it's a weird heavy. It's a very mushy trigger. It's really hard to stage, and it's not a very clean break. It's actually rather mushy. It's just kind of goes and goes. Now, it's not a jerky mushy. It's kind of like a marshmallow mushy, but then it's also a heavy trigger pull at the same time. Now, of course, that's probably a safety measure to prevent accidental negligent discharges as far as having a heavy trigger pull, but it in turn makes a not very enjoyable trigger. The trigger is not that great, to be honest with you. The trigger isn't really standout on the Beretta Nano. It could use some work, but I do understand why it's so heavy, especially considering it's supposed to be concealed carry firearm. So I'm not going to knock it for being heavy. What I will knock it for is the fact that the trigger is really mushy. And I think they could have smoothed out the trigger a little bit more and made it a little bit better. Now, it may be a matter of actually breaking the trigger in, and after extensive firing, this trigger might start to smooth out a little bit more. But as it stands right now, the trigger is very mushy. Now, the Nano is very small. It's a micro compact. So its main competitor is going to be the car PM9 for the most part. And it's not an overly drastically small gun like the PM9, which is quite odd, and honestly sits in between size-wise between the Shield and the car PM9. And it's not exactly a light gun either. It is a very top-heavy type gun, and though it is rather thin, I think the fact that it is so heavy and feels heavy kind of takes away from the thin profile of this particular firearm. Now, I'm going to do a comparison between this and the M&P Shield and show you which is more thinner and which one feels lighter. But this gun by far does seem to feel a lot heavier in hand, especially considering its size profile. It's supposed to be a micro compact, but it doesn't weigh the size of a micro compact. It almost feels like a regular compact. So it's pushing regular compact weight. And I'm not too pleased with that. But like I said, it is designed from a dimension standpoint to be a concealed carry firearm, and it does achieve that. I will not take that away from this gun. It is a small gun. It's easily concealable. You get 6 rounds of 9mm plus 1. When it's all said and done, the Nano isn't a gun that I would actually really desire to own. But I will say that I can see where some people may generate a certain appeal for this particular firearm. But for me personally, it's not something that I feel I really need in my life right now. There's nothing about it, like I said before, that really draws me to it. So in my mind, the Beretta, it's okay. I don't really care for it too much. It could be a lot better in many ways. It's heavy, it is small, it is very concealable. So if you're just looking for a gun to get the job done, it is priced reasonably. And I think that it's something that, you know, could be on a list of micro compacts if you're in the market for something like that. But otherwise, it's not a dream gun by any stretch of the imagination. Now, I do plan on doing a follow-up shooting review on this particular firearm, and maybe my thoughts will change after I shoot it. But as of now, not so much. It doesn't really move me. It's not. All right, folks, that's Mr. Coleon Noir, and I'm out.